All right, good morning. This is March 30th, 2020. This is A2, AP Computer Science A. Today, what I would like to do with you is I would like to, just like we did last class, go through those 5 multiple choice questions, talk about any questions or comments related to them at all, remind you of a few other deadlines for your final project, and then answer any questions that you guys have concerning the AP exam, concerning the final project, concerning really whatever. All right, so that's really the goal of today. So let's get started by taking a look at those questions that we got. So these questions were definitely a little harder than the previous day's questions. It just kind of worked out that way. I kind of pulled them from a random pool of questions. It wasn't like I intentionally made this one a lot more difficult. Just so happens that these ended up being a lot harder. Essentially what I have, if I'll let you in on a little insight, is I have a database of 100 practice multiple choice questions, and I just made a random number generator 1 to 100. So when it generates something, that's the question we pull. So that's how I've been just constructing these for you. It is still a process to type them out, but still. All right, so in any case, that's a program that you could write. Looking at this first question here, this is definitely talking about arrays. It says, suppose that 2 arrays of int values A and B contain the same number of elements. Consider this method right here. It's called find something you pass into arrays. It has this value called found, which starts out as true. It says we're going through the whole array, right? Int I is 0, I is less than array.length, I plus plus. If the first array at index I is not equal to the second array at index I, it sets found equal to false, and then at the very, very end of that whole for loop, it returns found. So the question is, which of the following best describes the functionality of the method find something? And if you notice our responses here, we still only got 8 responses, which is not the entire class. So please make sure it's very, very critical that you're doing these questions. I appreciate those of you that did complete these questions, but if you did not, please, please, please make sure that you're doing that. So the majority was A, which was 75%. We got 1 for C and 1 for E. So A is the correct answer here, because this method should return true if arrays A and B contain identical elements in the same order. You know what I'm going to do is I am going to mark this bold, just so for the future, if you're going back to study this, and I'll make sure I do that with the previous set as well. If you're going back to study this, just so you know which is the correct answer. So this is A, because what this is doing, like if you look at this little sample of code, it's going through this loop and it's comparing array at index I for A and B. So it's saying, are these the same? Are these the same? Are these the same? Are these the same? And if there's any instance in which that's not the case, it sets this found value equal to false. So otherwise, if this never happens, that means all your values in array A and array B were the same throughout, all the way from index 0 up to index length minus 1. So therefore, it would just never trigger found to be false, and it would just return true, meaning that they were the same. So that should be choice A. Choice B is not the case. This could be the case, choice B, if you did something like this. Something like this, you tried to implement some sort of idea of starting at the end of the list and then subtracting I as you continue to progress backwards. That's how you could do something like compare if A is in order to B being in reverse order. You could say contain the identical elements in any order. That's a lot harder to do. Typically, if you want to check if 2 arrays contain the same elements, you're just going to sort them and then compare them. But doing it in any order is really hard. That's definitely would require some more code than this little for loop. Returning true if A contains at least 1 element also in array B. I mean, that is true, but it definitely doesn't best describe the functionality. I think that's really the key. That is the case. Like, if they contain identical elements, then clearly at least 1 element is in both arrays, but that's not the best description. And choice E returns true if they do not have any elements in common. That would be true if we flip these around. That would be checking to see that they have no elements that match up. If I said found is false up here and set it to true here. All right. Any other questions, comments, concerns about that first multiple choice question? Check the chat quickly. Nothing. All right, very good. Going to question 2. Question 2 was split, 50-50. 50% on A, 50% on B. So let's take a look. It refers to this card and deck class, which is shown here. Just very quickly, this is similar to the one we actually wrote in class. It used a little bit of a different twist on the syntax, but it's more or less the same. We have a suit and a value. This one uses a string for the suit, and like we used 2 ints, if you remember, and then just converted them to strings later. This uses 1 string and 1 int. So here's your constructor, which we'll talk about in just a moment. Here is your getter for get suit, get value, and then this card name class pretty much does that same thing that we called print card info or display card info or card name or whatever we happen to call it. This one's called card name. It says your face value is equal to null, essentially. It's just an empty string. If value is equal to 11, then it sets that equal to J for Jack. 12 is Q for Queen. 0 is K for King. And 1 is A for Ace, which is a creative way to actually do it. If the value is between 2 and 10, then it just goes ahead and says that value, like 2 of clubs, for example. And then otherwise it returns the face value of the suit. So it's saying if you're between 2 and 10, it does that. Otherwise, it actually returns this name. We then have this deck class. This deck class contains an array of cards. It also has this final int number of cards equal to 52. Remember that keyword final means that that keyword is not going to change, or that value is not going to change, nor should it. There's always 52 cards in a deck. It doesn't show the implementation for these and all the other methods. So the first question is saying, which of the following is the correct implementation code for the constructor? So if I go back up to the constructor, notice I'm getting the value cards, the number, or sorry, can't speak. Getting the variable card suit as a string. I'm getting the variable card value as an int. So since I'm getting those things and the actual names in my object are suit and value, the constructor should say suit equals card suit and value equals card value. So I believe that corresponds with choice A. They would be switched around if they were switched around up here. If this was called card suit and this was called card value, and then this was suit and value, then they would be switched around and that would be choice B. But keep in mind, when you're declaring the variable of something, you're saying, I want this value of suit to be equal to what the user provided. I want this thing called value to be equal to what the user provided. So that's why it's choice A. Choice B, again, is I'm glad that if people were to get tripped up on something, let me put it this way, that it was choice B, because choice B is certainly convincing. Choice C, D, and E, though, I'm really glad nobody picked because those really don't make any sense at all. Card equals new card with suit and value. That doesn't really mean anything. It's definitely not the place for it in the constructor to create a card object. Same thing here. It also doesn't specify the name of the object, so this is bad. And then I wouldn't actually use the methods within the constructor to get the suit and get the value because they haven't been stored yet. So that's important. All right. Any questions on number 2? We're all feeling hunky-dory, happy about number 2. Okay, excellent. We'll pop up. All right, number 3 then says, consider the implementation of a print deck method that is added to the deck class. The intent of the method is to print the cards in the deck, 1 per line. So I have this print deck method. There's my, and it says it's a void method, notice. Which of the following is the correct implementation code? Do you just...
Georgia, you stopped presenting.
I stopped presenting?
Yes.
Well, that is a disaster. Let's make sure that we...
Travesty.
That is a travesty. Sorry about that. There we go. We should be back up now. We're back up
now.
All right, excellent. Great. Probably because I closed out that little pop-up. I bet it closed out my presentation. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. So now going to here. I know you got an image within an image within an image for a minute there. All right, going back to here. If you're going to print out the deck, do we just do a system.out.println, card name, and pass in the whole deck array? Definitely not. Definitely not choice 1. That would be that wouldn't make any sense. You want to pass in the specific indices of the array, so this choice seems valid. And then this choice would not be valid at all. So I believe it's 2 only, which is B. Let's see, the majority was option B, which is good. Keep in mind that option E would encompass 3 as well. We can't just pass in the array to have it printed. We need to pass in the specific data that's stored within the array. So that's the really key difference there. We got in the chat here? Oh, Seth is here. Hello, Seth. All right, cool. Any other questions on that? That shouldn't like pop up in a window. Get out of it. That's annoying. All right.
Showing off recursion.
Cool with that? That would definitely be recursion, actually. That would be a great example of infinite recursion. That's a good example. I like that. A screen within a screen within a screen within a screen with no base case. All right, next, number 4 says, consider the method reverse below. This was definitely the hardest one. This required you to definitely do a little bit of work out on paper. So it says the method is intended to return. I think it's clear what the question is, but it's not clear what the answer is. And look at your responses. They were all over the map. A, B, C, D, and E, all getting representation on question 4. So it just it requires a little paperwork. So I'm going to do a little work on paper off to the side. It says consider the method reverse below. It's intended to return an int value of n with its digits reversed. For example, if n is 234, it should return 432. Assume the value of n is greater than 0. So it says you have this thing called int rem and then int rev num. Assume that means the number of revolutions. And then it says you have your code segment and you're returning rev num, or your reverse number. Sorry, not revolutions, reverse number. So let's see which one actually makes sense. You have 4 int I is 0, I is less than or equal to n, I plus plus. I like when the code actually provides us with an example because we could just use that example and check that out. That's a great strategy for the AP exam. If they give you an example, use the example. Suppose that n is 234. So if n is 234, right, I'll just do it off to the side here. 234 mod 10 means that when you take 234 and divide it by 10, the remainder is 4. So it sets rem equal to 4, right? It then says that rev num is equal to itself, which is currently 0, times 10, still 0, plus rem, so equal to 4. And then here it says that n is equal to n divided by 10, so it takes n and now makes it, dividing it by 10 would cut out the decimal, it makes it 23. Okay? If I am making any mistake here, just feel free to let me know. So currently, at the end of this first choice, rev num is 4. That's important to mention. Now we go back up to the top of the loop. I is definitely less than n because we have to do it like 23 more times. So we would say now that rem is equal to n mod 10. 23 mod 10 is now equal to 3. So that means rem is going to equal 3. I'm going to do rev num, which is currently 4. Right? Let me write it here. I'm going to multiply that by 10 to get 40. I'm going to add the 3. So rev num is now 43. And then, let's see, we got n is equal to n divided by 10. So 23 divided by 10 is 2, because it cuts off the decimal, right? And then,
Giorgio,
yes.
is this the easiest way to do this?
I think the easiest way to do it is really to just trace the code. That's exactly what I'm doing here, is I'm just taking the example that was used, and I'm just tracing the code to see if it actually spits out the correct answer. Does that make sense?
No, I mean like in general, without all this code. Would this be
would this be the
reverse it?
easiest way to reverse the number?
Yeah.
Probably not. I feel like the easiest way would probably use substrings or something like that to actually like reverse them, to reverse the digits independently. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What this does is it literally calculates the new number and it prints out in reverse order. Definitely not the most efficient way to accomplish that, I would say. So in any case, where were we now? I think the n number is going to be 2 here. If I look here, we got 2. Oh, maybe. Hold on. N is now 2. 2 mod 10 is, it divides evenly 0 times. So the remainder is 2. Oh, I think it should be, yeah. So rem is 2. You now got rev num, which is 43. So 43 times 10 is 430 plus 2 becomes your 432. You would take n divided by 10, and this would go now to 0, and so you'd be done. So you would actually get rev num of 432, which is true. So that would work out for option 1. So already that limits you down to A, C, and E. Yes, we understand that? Let's check option 2. again, let's just use the example that they give us. If n is 234, you're saying while n is not equal to 0, pretty much the same idea. So let's say we got, I think this is really the same code trace, right? If I'm looking at this now. And we saw that this loop terminated actually when n was equal to 0. So I'm pretty sure this should also work, right? We saw that that loop ended up at the top when n was 0, if I'm remembering correctly, right? Because if you remember, we just had, let me actually back it up. Back it up. Right here, we had when n was 0, that's when this loop ended. And so if you notice, choice 2 contains the same code, it just has a different condition for ending the loop. But that condition was met up here, and I believe that condition is just going to be met as a natural consequence of this. So choice 2 would also be valid. Choice 3, let's find out. Actually, little AP insight. If you notice, we confirm that choice 1 works and choice 2 works. There is no option that says 1, 2, and 3. So that would be a great indication that we're already heading towards choice C, which, what did we get for C? 25% we got for choice C. But I can actually confirm that with you. Again, let's suppose n is 234. That means that I is 234, because it says I is equal to n. We do I mod n, so 234 mod n is going to be, mod 10 is 23. I said mod n. I mod 10 is 23. Here we would do the same calculation again, where I now do 230 times 10. Oh, not 230, sorry, 0 times 10, which is 0, plus rem, which is 23. You would now go back to the top and divide I by 100. So that would come down to 2. That's what this I divide equals 100. You would then do 2 mod 10. 2 mod 10 is 2, but this would come out to be 232, I believe, not 234. Do you notice that? Or not 432. This definitely doesn't work, right? If I did that calculation correctly. Certainly possible that I made a mistake, but again, a great indication is the fact that we actually don't have a response that says 1, 2, and 3, so I believe we're just looking at 1 and 2. Did that make sense to everybody? And this one we said was choice 2 only, right? And this one was A. Okay, great. Moving on to the last question, which was a good thing on strings. Question 5, the overwhelming response was choice C, and I believe that's correct. Taking a look here, if you had string S1 is equal to crab, that was actually the example used. I didn't try to be funny. I don't know why they said crab. It was the example in the AP practice. S2 is also equal to crab, and S3 is now equal to S1. Which of the following would evaluate to true? This would not evaluate to true, if you notice, because we need that dot equals to compare the contents of strings. Here, equals equals, these are not identical to each other. Even though they contain the identical contents, it's that same argument of an object where this object S1 is not the same object as this one, which is S2, so they would not return true. That's what happens if you don't use the dot equals. Dot equals specifically compares the contents of strings. So you would say, yeah, the word crab is equal to the word crab, so we're happy with that. And then here you'd say, well, S3 is also crab, so crab is equal to crab. Yay, we're happy. Okay? Any other questions on that?
I have a question.
What's up?
So if crab didn't already exist, could you still do string S1 equals crab, or do you have to, like, initialize it like you did S2?
Oh, could you say that? That's a great question. So, like, the question is really, do we have to type this in order to initialize it? With strings, you actually find that if you did this, it creates a new string called crab. So there's actually no distinction between this and this. Okay? That is just the case for strings, because strings are special and commonly used. Programmers got lazy, so within the string object there is code that if you just say this, it does this. That's a great question, though. That's not the case in general for objects. All right. Any other questions on this? All right. So again, we got 9 responses now. I think someone just filled in the correct answers. If if you did not do the multiple choice, again, please make sure that you do. It's imperative that you do, so you stay consistent with, or you like stay up to speed. You stay consistent with the class. You keep up, all that type of stuff. Again, I don't know specifically what the AP Computer Science A exam is going to look like yet in terms of topics. It's advertised as being or advertised to us, I guess, as educators, as being a 45-minute free response exam on topics that should have been covered up through March. We have covered everything that is on the exam already, and a little bit more because we did do 2D arrays already. 2D arrays are not going to be on the AP exam this year, according to the College Board. But they have yet to tell me the specific topics that are going to be on the exam. So until they do, I think it's a great idea to just keep up with the multiple choice practice, make sure that you're staying on top of things, so we can be fresh on whatever topics they decide to throw at us. Once they do tell us, which they're advertising that it should be Friday, that we know, Friday, April 3rd. Once they do inform us as to what topics specifically are going to be on the AP exam, I am definitely going to transition to doing free response questions focused on those topics. There are a lot of them provided on the College Board website. There's this thing they have set up called AP Student. I don't know if anybody's looked into that either with this class or their other AP classes, but I'm definitely going to get you set up on that. We're going to be rolling on that. One other thing is that the College Board does provide you with, this year, because of all the stuff going on with school distance learning and et cetera, they are providing free review sessions on their YouTube channel via YouTube Live. I did link that to you via email. If you haven't checked that out yet, I highly recommend it. I believe the broadcast is every day at about 4:45, if I remember correctly, p.m. It might be 4:30, but it's somewhere around that time. They're doing AP Computer Science A review. It's entirely free to watch. I'd highly recommend tuning in. If you don't tune in live, it's recorded for you, so you can go ahead and check that out. All right. Ultimately, with all this distance learning going on, I'm going to try to help you to prepare as much as possible, but the preparation really falls on you. The textbook is uploaded on Google Classroom, a digital version of the textbook, a PDF. I highly recommend reading it. That's the official AP Computer Science A textbook. It's the book I have on the floor next to me over here. So please make sure you check that out. And other than that, I'm done with what I have to say. Does anybody have any questions concerning these multiple choice questions, concerning the final project, concerning the AP exam? I'll open up the floor. Any questions at all? No questions? Not a one? Not a one, huh? All right.
No.
Well, yeah. What's up?
I was just saying I didn't have a question.
Oh well, well that's fantastic. So, if there's no questions, I'll hang around here for another 5 minutes. But that's all I have for you today. There will again just be 5 multiple choice questions for next time. So make sure you practice them. Okay. Please make sure you do them. It's very important that you do them. We should see all of the responses done, not just 3/4 of the class or 2/3 of the class. It should be everybody, please, next time. Okay. Thank you, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your blue day today.
Have a nice day, Mr. Giorgio.
See you later.
Have a good day, Mr. Giorgio.
Bye, everyone. What's up, Ryan? Oh, he said see ya. See ya. Just hanging around to see if anybody has any questions. I think we're all good. Yeah, we're all good. Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. Make sure you fill out attendance if you haven't filled out attendance.
Bye-bye.